My guest today is the founder and the director of the Institute for Cortical Reeducation. She's also on the teaching staff of Esalen Institute, where she conducts twice-yearly workshops. Let's meet Harriet Goslins. Hello, Harriet. How are you and welcome?
Thank you.
Tell me, what is cortical reeducation? Let's start with the top.
Well, cortical reeducation is a system that deals with chronic dysfunction, chronic pain, injury, recent injury, compensations from injuries that have happened a long time ago and people are still dealing with limitations and side effects from them. And it's quite different from most modalities because it's a system of, not of medicine, but of education. It's really an education of the nervous system because most dysfunction has to do with disrupting movement patterns in the nervous system. So what we do is we work with the motor cortex, which is that part of the brain that calls the shots in movement, rather than working with the local area that's been injured or traumatized. Well, I took a week-long workshop at the Dominican College in San Rafael. This is 16 years ago now, with this gray-haired gnome who sort of looked like a cross between Schweitzer and Einstein. And his name was Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais. He was at Madame Curie Institute in the late 40s, and he hurt his knees in soccer. He was a soccer buff in France. And the best medical minds in Europe told him he was going to lose the use of his knees. So he said rubbish, which was his favorite word, and quit the Madame Curie Institute, went into seclusion, and started studying how does the nervous system learn and relearn during injury, but not from a physician's model. So I spent a week there with him, and I was in a gym with 80 people doing funny little movements on the floor, and I saw people, you know, literally not need crutches and canes at the end of a week, and people lose limps and get speech back and all kinds of miraculous things. And I myself got a more organized body, and I felt more like a powerful animal, more of myself as a woman, everything coming from just getting in touch with my body through these funny little movements. I decided this is what I wanted to do. The next day I came home and I had to go back to work at my husband's practice where we had a holistic practice in dentistry, and wouldn't you know it, someone came in who was in a wheelchair and when he was 10 had been hit in the chest with a rock and was now like 18 and couldn't move from the neck down. And I was to give him an exam, prophylaxis and all that. And so full was I, so inspired by this week and what I had seen and what I had learned, that I just started doing some little things with him that I had learned from Dr. Feldenkrais. I didn't know what I was going to accomplish, but I felt I had to give him. But you wanted to try. He was a lovely young boy who was going to try to go to law school even though he could only write with a pencil in his mouth. And, you know, he had hardly any movement of his head, and that was it. And I worked with him for about 15 minutes, just with things I picked up from the week from Dr. Feldenkrais. And within 15 minutes, he could turn down to the waist and lean over and spit in the cuspidor. And he hadn't been able to do that in 10 years. So we called the mother in, and of course she thought she was coming in to hear how many cavities he had. And we said, look.
What a moment of joy it must have been for you.
It changed my life. All the way across the parking lot, his mother and sister were talking very animatedly, and he was turning like this for the first time in 10 years, just to feel the pleasure of the movement. And of course I referred them to a Feldenkrais practitioner, because at that time I couldn't do any more with him, but that really hooked me, and I waited a couple years until I could train with Dr. Feldenkrais. I found something that now people who come to me find, that there are many functions that we lose that we're unaware of, and until you get them back, you don't know you've lost them. So in my, early 30s at the time, I thought I was in pretty good shape, and I realized how many of just the normal jumping, twisting, turning, being kids that we all lose in civilized life. And I got that back.